What is up everyone, Nick here, and in today's video we're going to be covering the brand new FLSUN T1 Delta 3D printer, and make sure you stay tuned till the end of the video to get a sneak peek into my newest Iron Man project I'm working on. The T1 is essentially the little brother to the FLSUN S1, which was released in June 2024. It's essentially a smaller version of the S1 with less features, but a much more budget-friendly price of $599 USD, compared to the S1's retail price of $1,499 USD. Now let's quickly dive into the T1 specs and what makes it stand out. Right off the bat, the T1 has a build volume of 260 millimeters in diameter and 330 millimeters in height, giving you ample room to 3D print fairly large projects. The T1 also features a full metal frame as well as some glass and acrylic panels to fully enclose the build volume. And on top of that, the extruder on the T1 is a direct drive dual gear extruder, and FLSUN claims that it can achieve up to 78 newtons of extrusion pressure. With regards to temperatures, the brass nozzle on the T1 is said to achieve up to 300 Celsius, and the PEI build plate can achieve up to 110 Celsius. And speaking of brass nozzles, the T1 is meant to be compatible with V6 style nozzles. Combined with the machine's ability to reach high temperatures, the T1 is also able to keep everything cool with a CPAP turbofan, which can operate at a speed of 30,000 RPM and can produce large wind forces of 7.7 meters per second. Combined with the T1's high temperatures and enclosure, it also has a composite HEPA and activated carbon air filter, which means that this printer can handle ABS and ASA along with many other engineering grade filaments. And one of the T1's standout features is its incredible printing speeds. Now, FLSUN claims that it can 3D print up to a speed of 1,000 millimeters a second, and it can accelerate up to 30,000 millimeters a second. FLSUN also claims that it can reach a maximum flow rate of up to 90 millimeters squared per second with PLA. Now, whether or not those specs are accurate, we're going to be finding that out later. The T1 also comes packed with a 4.3-inch color touchscreen, 8 gigabytes of internal memory, and a 16 gigabyte USB flash drive. It supports real-time monitoring with an integrated camera, time-lapse photography, filament detection, vibration compensation, power loss recovery, and auto bed leveling. This 3D printer really seems to have it all. Now, the T1 is meant to work with FLSUN Slicer, but it can also work with a bunch of other third-party slicers. And it's also compatible with a wide variety of formats like STL, OBJ, 3MF, and AMF. And now that we know exactly what this 3D printer is supposed to be capable of, we're gonna go through the process of unboxing and assembling this 3D printer, as well as my experiences with it. But just before we do that, I would like to tell you guys about this video's sponsor, FlexiSpot. FlexiSpot is the industry leader in ergonomic solutions, and they're dedicated to creating innovative products to enhance your comfort, productivity, and well-being. For regular viewers of the channel, you might have noticed that something's a little different with my regular desk, and that's because I've since upgraded to FlexiSpot's E7 Pro standing desk. This desk is built for those who demand both functionality and style. With a robust dual motor lifting system, the E7 Pro adjusts smoothly and quietly, allowing you to switch between sitting and standing positions effortlessly. The solid steel frame supports up to 355 pounds and provides a stable and robust workspace. As you can see, it can not only hold up the weight of the T1, which is about 45 pounds, but it can also support the vibrations and shaking of the T1 caused by its insane printing speeds. Plus, the sleek design and robust materials makes it a stylish addition to any workspace or office. Personally, I went with the white base along with the maple chipboard, and I feel like it's a very nice addition to my personal workspace. But let me know if you agree with me in the comments down below. On top of that, each FlexiSpot product is highly customizable with additional features, like this small drawer that mounts underneath the desk, and this super nifty power outlet which mounts effortlessly to the table, which I'm currently using to power the FLSUN T1 throughout this video. Now pair that with FlexiSpot's C7 ergonomic chair, and you've got yourself a solid setup for maximum productivity. Designed with your health in mind, this chair features an advanced lumbar support system that adapts to your spine, providing unparalleled comfort throughout the day. The breathable mesh back keeps you cool, while the adjustable armrest, seat height, and tilt mechanism ensures a customized fit for every user. Thank you again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the unboxing and the assembly of the T1.
Flashback.
First impressions. Table still stands. What we have in here. Completely missed the tape. What am I doing? I cut everything except the tape. This is not going good. There we go. Okay, I think that's all the small bits. Now we need to take out these two gigantic panels. Oh, they're not that heavy. That's nice. I'm not a fan of this kind of styrofoam for packaging. It's just covered in styrofoam dust right now. Yeah, see, this is what I'm saying. It's covered in dust. So these are the actual crossbars that are going to mount to the 3D printer base and, you know, make the triangular shape of the Delta 3D printer. And it has these bars which are attached to a pulley, which all gets guided by this stepper motor, and that's going to run the extruder. So far, the very first step of this process, I barely understand installing the spool holder. I've never seen a spool holder that looks quite like this. I have no idea what I'm doing. Hopefully the juice is worth the squeeze, and this is actually a super practical spool holder to use, because the more I think about it, the more I think it might actually work well. Basically, you have like this crossbar looking thing that slides into this hole and basically holds into place. So since the door opens this way, you just pull this out, add the spool, and close it back in, I think. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Oh my. And there we, not quite, there we go. Yeah, awesome, nice. So I just installed all the screws for the top and the bottom of the 3D printer, and now I need to install the extruder. Now this is where it gets funky. I need to add 12 screws to this extruder, 4 on each one of these 3 brackets. If I remember correctly, on the original FLSUN V400, it's just these ball and sockets that you need to attach from these brackets to the extruder and you're done. This is quite a bit more work, but I'm fairly confident that this is more of an upgrade than anything else, and that this will actually help with the sturdiness of the 3D printer. Now we just need to untie this and start attaching the umbilical and this big old tube, which is going to be for the cooling fan. So I need to remove this cover plate so I can route this cable up here and plug it here. And now we can finally attach the display. Just take this tape off and be really careful with this cord. Okay, I think I did it. I think that works. And then the cord just goes into there. And that just locks into place just like that. Very nice. So I have it plugged up. I switched it to 115 volts. It's fully assembled. I think we're finally ready to boot it up. So let me just flip the switch here. The fans are booting up. So the lights inside just turned on. The light bar is on. The screen is slowly booting up. I can hear another fan turning on. Don't know what that's about. So the self-inspection is completed. Let's click on confirm. So here we have the 3D printer itself. We have the time, temperatures. That's really cool. And it also comes with a bunch of pre-sliced files. So we're definitely going to be printing these in a second. And then we have the controls for the home, the unlock, the fans. We have general with a brightness for the touchscreen. Oh, neat. So it seems that since this is connected to the internet, we can automatically update the firmware of the 3D printer. And then we have a folder with videos, logs, and models. Cool. So now that we have the T1 fully assembled and configured, we can finally start running off some prints. So to start off, we're going to be using some of the G-code that already came pre-installed on the 3D printer, and from there we're going to run off some of our own tests, and then we're going to start working on the project. And to print those pre-sliced files, we're going to be using FLSUN's high-speed PLA. I've personally never used this before, but I have a feeling that this is going to come in pretty handy with some of the high speeds we're going to be using on the FLSUN T1. So let me just open this up and we can start printing. So that funky crossbar right there is the spool holder. All we need to do is lift it up and slide it out of the way, and now we can insert the spool right there and push this back in. Now we're gonna go to control and we're going to heat it up for PLA. So right now it's heating up for 60 degrees Celsius for the print bed and 220 Celsius for the nozzle. And as you can probably hear, I don't know if it's picking up on my lapel mic, but some of the fans just kicked in. It's not too loud at the moment. And now that our filament is extruded, let's go to this, click on Benchy. Let's do the vibration compensation, bed leveling, and why not? Let's do the time lapse too. If I can click on it, there we go. It says it should take 5 minutes and only 1 gram of filament. We're gonna see about that. I'm gonna start a timer as soon as I start the print. So I have a stopwatch at the ready on my phone. Let's click on print. What's really neat is that as it's doing all the different setups for the vibration compensation, preheating and whatnot, it's giving you a status and how much time it's going to take. So right now, it's at preheating and it says it's going to take about 5 minutes. I'm assuming that's for all 3 steps. So far, between the vibration compensation, the preheating, and the leveling, we're at about 4 minutes, so not bad. And we're officially off to the races. So I added another lap, so that was the time between both settings. And it's extruding very well. Holy moly. So after a few days of 3D printing with this machine, so far I'm pretty satisfied with the results. So up to this point, I was able to 3D print most of the test files that were pre-sliced on this machine. And of course, I started with the benching. Now this only took 8 minutes to print, and honestly, it turned out pretty good. Now keep in mind, this was 3D printed with FLSUN's high-speed PLA, and for the most part, it turned out all right. You can read the text on the bottom. The arches on the benchy turned out pretty good. The only thing that kind of disappoints me is the bridging. So as you can see, the window at the front of the boat, it has a significant arch to the bridge. And it's kind of surprising when you consider that the fan in this machine runs at 30,000 RPM and it was running at 100% for most of the print time. I just find it odd that despite the power of this fan, the bridging looks the way that it does. And the next print I ran kind of resolved one of the nitpicks I had with this 3D printer, and that would be the camera stand. Now this is 3D printed in 4 separate parts, and if I remember correctly, it only took about an hour and a half. This is meant to encase the camera that's included inside of the T1. You just pop out this rear panel, stuff in the camera, guide the USB cable out this tiny hole, clip it back in, and now you can display your camera wherever you like on the outside of the machine. And on top of that, it is fully adjustable. Now, one of my main gripes when I was building this machine is that the USB cable for the camera was just way too long and there wasn't a place to actually tuck it in anywhere. But now I kind of understand why the cable is so long. It's so that if you choose to take out the camera from the unit, you can place it on the outside inside this mount. And speaking of which, the quality on this 3D print is all right, but at this point we can start to see some of the issues with the 3D printer. Now, as far as issues go, it's a pretty good one. It's just too darn fast. If you look really closely to some of the walls along the 3D prints, you can see rippling, which is indicative of under extrusion. Now, this isn't because there's a clog in the machine. This is because the printer is trying to print so fast that the filament just can't melt fast enough to extrude properly. And as far as under extrusion goes, it is very minimal too. You can just barely notice it, but it is there nonetheless. But to be fair, this was printed in a regular green PLA. This was not high-speed PLA. And you can see those exact same issues with this little cat figurine. If you look along some of the walls, you can see some of that under extrusion, but it is fairly minimal, and the print quality itself on this little cat figurine is pretty all right. After running off these prints, I also went ahead and printed this cute little flower pot. And this is where the T1 really shines, because on this particular 3D print, it is going fairly slow when it's doing all of this basket texture. And as a result, the print quality is absolutely phenomenal. The texture is just super nice and smooth, and on top of that, the first layer is absolutely gorgeous. I'll try to include some footage right here of when it was 3D printing the basket's first layer. If I'm not mistaken, the T1 has the ability to automatically set the Z offset, which is why this first layer is just silky smooth. So since this burgundy PLA turned out so good, I figured I would 3D print one more part with it, and I did this vase. Now the vase only took about an hour and a half. However, it is riddled with under extrusion, especially along some of these corners of the vase. So as a test, I decided I would rerun the exact same G-code that was included on the T1 to begin with and print it in FLSUN's high-speed PLA. And I have to say the difference is absolutely staggering. All the imperfections that were caused by under extrusion are now gone, and now we're left with a super nice vase. Now we're already starting to see a theme pop up with the sheer speed of this machine, and that'll come up later when we talk about the slicer. But before we get to that, I 3D printed one last 3D file on this machine, and I have no clue what this is. The G-code is called Slicer, and I don't know what it is. I just do not know. Please let me know in the comments down below if you know what this is. It's like this weird cone thing that kind of looks like a Christmas tree, and it has these holes that are perforating it from the underside, and the amount of holes like multiply and shrink down as the layers increase. I don't know what this is. I tried blowing in it to see if it was like some sort of ocarina. I don't know what this is. Anyways, moving on. I just want to finish up with my 3D printing experience before we jump into the slicer. Did I mention this machine is incredibly loud? It's absolutely absurd. Now let me include some footage of the 3D printer running with the sound on. Now for all the 3D models that were pre-sliced and included with the T1, all of them had the fan running at 90 to 100%. Now, if you have the door open and you are standing right next to it, it is averaging 85 decibels and maxing out at about 89 decibels. If you're planning on getting this machine to print as fast as possible, which I totally understand, I highly recommend you also consider finding space for this 3D printer where you're not going to be spending much time around. But if you're not going full send on your 3D prints all the time at max speeds, that's okay too, because you can easily fine tune the fan settings so that it's not nearly as loud. For example, I was able to run off these 3D prints running the fan at about 40%, which is a lot more bearable, and it didn't really affect the quality much whatsoever. And on top of that, if you want to print ABS where you're not really going to be using the fan, then the sound really isn't going to be an issue anyways. And speaking of tuning, FLSUN Slicer is in dire need of it. Now for context, FLSUN Slicer is, well, as the name implies, it is FLSUN's Slicer software for their own 3D printers. And when you open up FLSUN Slicer, you can see that it's an amalgamation of not only Prusa Slicer, but also Bamboo Slicer and Clipper mainsail. And it's not the best amalgamation either. Now, for some reason on my version on my computer, I can't see some of the taskbars at the top. I can't read the device button properly. I know it's there and I know what to look for because I've used Bamboo Slicer and Orca Slicer. It's just not readable in the FLSUN Slicer. It's cut off. I don't know why. And when you move to the device page, it just opens up mainsail on top of the Bamboo Slicer device page, and I don't understand why. For something that's a combination of both Prusa Slicer in the way that it slices things and Bamboo Slicer in the way that it communicates with the 3D printer, it's just oddly done, and there's a lot of features missing from those softwares that could have easily been integrated into this one. For example, the time-lapse feature. If you want to run a time-lapse, you can activate it right before your print on this machine. However, once you're done your 3D print, you need to manually save it to the USB, take out the USB, and plug it into your computer to export the MP4 file, which on a few occasions just hasn't worked for me. For some reason, I couldn't open up the MP4 file. And then you compare that to Bamboo Slicer, where you can just open up the device page and your time lapses are all there. I just don't get it because it's clearly using Bamboo Slicer, so why isn't that feature just implemented in the way that it was in Bamboo Slicer? Anyways, that's beyond the point. Now, the slicer itself works. You can easily export your G-code wirelessly to the machine and have it print instantaneously. That is very nice. And when it comes to the actual slicing itself, it is just Prusa Slicer. It works the exact same way. But one thing that kind of drives me up the walls are the filament presets. Not only are there not a lot of options, there are just generic options, which is totally fine, but they're slightly adjusted to go as fast as possible, and to be quite honest, it just doesn't work on the actual machine. Now, for example, when I originally started 3D printing this Unibeam file by Neon Robotnik, I decided to go with the generic PLA preset without any sort of modifications whatsoever. I just wanted to see what the machine was capable of with the presets that FLSUN had provided. Now, at first I didn't notice any issues with the print quality, but then I looked a little bit closer, and that's when I realized, as it was 3D printing, I could clearly see that the infill was under extruding. There just wasn't any infill to speak of. It was all all spider webs. And when I took a look at the presets for generic PLA, mind you, I noticed that the infill speed was set to 700 millimeters per second. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know any sort of generic PLA that can print that fast that isn't high-speed PLA. So at that point, why not just make a preset for high-speed PLA? It would be much easier to distinguish between generic PLA and high-speed PLA within the presets, and would lead to less issues down the line, because if I would have known, I could have just printed this in high-speed PLA. Now, a lot of these issues come directly from the selected speeds within the presets themselves, and even with the speed reductions I made to the slicer profiles, the T1 was still printing faster than most 3D printers available on the market in this price range. Honestly, this would be a non-issue if the presets available in the slicer were just properly tuned to regular generic filaments. Now, before I give my final thoughts on the T1, we're going to do one last thing. First, we're going to test out some gray high-speed PLA by Elegoo and put it through its paces. And once we have all the settings dialed in, we're going to be 3D printing the prototype for my newest Iron Man Gauntlet. And once we have everything 3D printed, we're going to quickly assemble it and see if it works. Now, before I 3D printed these components for the glove, I figured that I would test out Elegoo's Rapid PLA Plus and test out how fast I can 3D print with it. So I ran off some max volumetric flow tests, and the results are not really good. As you can see, this one's a little worse for wear. If I remember correctly, I went up to 750 millimeters per second, and it's a far cry from 1,000 millimeters per second as advertised, so no. This one, however, looks a lot better. I maxed it out at 350 millimeters per second, and it's got some issues, but I think that gives me a good ballpark for how fast I can 3D print with this machine reliably using Elegoo's Rapid PLA Plus. So with this in mind, I made some adjustments to the filament presets in the slicer and 3D printed everything that I would need for this prototype. Now I have the entirety of the glove 3D printed. For reference, I used Do 3D's Universal Iron Man glove, and for the handguard, I used the files from Levy 3D's Mark 42 Gauntlet, which in part 2 of this project, we're going to be building to go along with the finished version of this glove. So make sure you're subscribed if you want an update on this project. Basically, I want to build a fully self-sustained Iron Man glove with a battery and all the electronics I would need for it to work on its own, while also having the ability to communicate with other parts of an Iron Man suit. So that means that we not only need a battery to fit inside the glove, but we also need some sort of PCB to serve as a breakout board for all the electronics. And that's where PCBWAY comes in. PCBWAY, if you don't know it already, is this channel sponsor, and they are the industry leader in PCB fabrication and 3D printing solution. From custom circuit boards to innovative 3D printed prototypes, PCBWAY offers unparalleled quality, fast turnaround times, and competitive pricing. And this is the PCB I designed specifically for this project. Not only does it have through holes for JST connectors that will go to the button, the battery, the light, and the speaker, and we're going to be installing 3 separate boards to this PCB to work together. We're going to be working with an ESP32S3, which is going to be controlling all the electronics, an ADXL345 to detect motion, as well as a DF Player Mini to play sounds. And this is how the whole system works. We have a 3.7 volt LiPo battery, which plugs into an Adafruit charging module. And this charging module is going to feed into the battery plug that we installed on the board, but once it's plugged in, it's not going to activate anything because we have a kill switch on board, which is going to allow us to turn this whole system on and off at will. And once the system is online, the NeoPixel is going to flash different colors, confirming that everything is working properly. And when we tilt the board upwards so that the text is readable, not only are we going to get a sound effect, but the NeoPixels are going to fade on. And if we move the board backwards, we're going to get a blast effect. So we're going to have a blast sound effect, and the NeoPixels are going to flicker. And if we move the board downwards, the light's going to fade off, and we're going to have a fade off sound effect. So now that we know everything works, I'm just going to screw everything together and we're going to test it out. And here I have the finished piece with all the electronics inside of the handguard. I even installed the NeoPixel right in this hole here. I used an old adapter that I designed using Tinkercad for this project, and as it would turn out, I 3D printed the glove at 100% scale, and it was basically a press fit for this 3D printed mount. So let me just slide this on. I might as well throw on the fingers while I'm at it. These fingers are really cool. They have their own built-in hinges that lock together, so all these digits stay together. It's really cool. It's not the most sturdy thing in the world, so once I'm done with the final version, I'm probably going to add elastics throughout all the fingertips. Now, if I flip the kill switch on the back of the handguard, the lights start flashing different colors. And now it's off, meaning it's live. Now if I just tilt it towards the camera, yeah. No, oh, there we go. That's so cool. And if I tilt my hand down, the light turns off and we get that nice sound effect. So just for clarity, I'm not going to be providing the PCB and the code just yet. That's going to be included with part 2 of this build. As you can see, I'm still having a hard time with some of the effects, so I'm going to try and iron that out before I release it. And these fingers are starting to fall off. So I'm just going to start taking all of this off and finally give you my final thoughts on the FLSUN T1. Down boy. I don't think I've ever had this many mixed feelings on a 3D printer. It's a good machine, it has a ton of super useful features, and it's a very fast 3D printer, but it's not nearly as fast as advertised. On top of that, FLSUN Slicer is weirdly put together, there's next to no filament presets available right now, and the filament presets that are available are slightly tweaked to go way faster than the filaments are actually capable of printing reliably at. So let's look at it this way. Do I recommend the T1 as a 3D printer? Yes. Do I recommend the overall user experience while using this 3D printer? No. Despite it being a really good 3D printer at a really affordable price, I just can't give my full recommendation. If you're someone who's looking to prototype as fast as possible with an affordable machine, and you don't mind using high-speed PLA and tweaking your own settings, then this machine is for you. But if you're someone who's looking for a user-friendly experience that's as close to plug and play as possible, then you can just skip this machine for now. I really hope that FLSUN will take this as constructive criticism, and they'll try to improve their slicer and provide better filament presets. And if not, maybe sometime down the road we'll get a fully developed 3D printer profile for Orca Slicer so that we can take this machine and use it to its fullest potential. And by using Orca Slicer, you'll just get a better user experience. If there are any updates at all concerning the FLSUN T1 with regards to its firmware or to the Slicer software, I will make sure to revisit this 3D printer in a future video with my thoughts on it. But as it stands right now with the current firmware and the current Slicer, there are just better options out there with better user experiences. But if you're still looking to buy this machine, there is currently a pre-sale going on FLSUN's website at the time of uploading this video, where you can buy the T1 at $499 US. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the T1 in the comments down below. And a huge thank you again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video, as well as PCBWAY for sponsoring the channel. And I will see you all in the next one.